This time on the Real Generation Gap.
The apocalypse is very much like kind of a human case study. It's about when society falls apart, who really comes out of us, you know?
Dude, you're responsible for your own actions. I mean, you might have been beat up as a kid or something, but you didn't need to turn into this.
Yeah. And when the CGI and the technology look as poor as that, it really breaks that immersion and you don't feel as connected in the movie.
Then the movie changed and it became woke.
Hi, welcome to the Real Generation Gap. I'm BJ Kang.
I'm Fred Satilli.
And the movie we're reviewing this week is Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, Revenge of the Peach Pit, the epic backstory of the Wasteland's darkest angel, Furiosa, and the events leading up to Fury Road.
I love motorcycles, chasing off-road vehicles and everything like that, and I ride a Harley Davidson, and now I know what I want in life. I want a chariot pulled by 3 Harley Davidsons. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to engineer that, but it seemed to work pretty good in the movie.
Yeah, this is
one of the vehicles that lasted all the way to the end.
It's Mad Max is a complete total love letter, as well as just sort of one of the most prominent apocalypse films, especially when it comes to like apocalyptic, like, you know, clothes and, you know, weaponry and tools, as well as like the engines and the machines. You know, I love, one of my favorite was that huge monster truck with like 3 different sets of like wheels on it, and the way that in one of the scenes where it's sort of chasing them, and you could see it begin to do that thing where it's trying to crush the back of the car like a real monster truck does at the derbies. And that was really cool.
Yeah, when it crashes through the gate.
Yeah.
The guy hits the gate 3 or 4 times and finally smashes it down, the big portcullis.
Yeah.
The thing that makes me laugh about all these from the first one until now is you're in a desert wasteland. In the beginning, it was pretty clear that it was Australia, but I think they'd be out there in a Prius, right? They got plenty of sunlight. It's in the future. They have solar technology. Maybe they didn't have the elements because, you know, you couldn't get them from China, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, but it's just hilarious to me that all those movies, they all have giant monster cars, you know, from the beginning, Thunderdome and everything. And it's all about fueling them up and getting that tanker. I'll drive that tanker, you know. Yeah. It's all about fueling up giant trucks for what? For what?
It's a battle over resources. It's a classic, you know, apocalypse story. It's a battle of resources, a battle, you know, of a war over conquest, and, you know, who gets the biggest cut of the pie, basically, when you're out there in the wasteland.
There's no pie. They're in the desert. Now in the movie, it starts where there's a little slice of utopia.
Yeah.
There's happy, peaceful people, and they're keeping their society and their homeland obscure from the rest of the world. They're not participating because they have enough water and enough, you know, farming, food and everything.
Fertile land.
So they're pretty happy. But a little girl goes to the out extremity of this place, and somebody who's kind of an adventurer finds her and captures her. And they bring her back to the living hell. Yeah. The living hell of the quasi-Viking gladiator mythical group of people. Yeah. And of course, she has to adapt to that lifestyle. And, you know, even in history, there were people who the Romans captured, and they would take some prince's son or whatever, and he would become the scribe, and he would become an intellectual. And then the book I'm thinking of, and for Romanians, they all know this, is Slave of the Huns. Mm-hmm. They take a young Roman noble, and they bring him in to live with the Huns, and he learns their way of life, and he falls in love with their way of life. He doesn't want to return to Rome. So this is, once again, like so many movies that we reviewed, including The Wizard of Oz, which we didn't review, she is trying to get home, but she can never go home because her innocence is destroyed. Her childhood is destroyed. Her growing up is destroyed. And she becomes as big a killing machine as any of the rest of these guys.
Yeah, that's what this story is really all about. When Mad Max Fury Road came out, Furiosa was a new character, but she was definitely probably one of the most compelling characters of the entire film. And so I definitely understand why they wanted to make a movie specifically on her character. I think this is one of the first times, and like I think this is probably the first time in the Mad Max franchise where they really flesh out the backstory of like a character where they look backwards.
I gotcha.
Instead of just moving on from one movie and then to the next events and stuff like that, because this is supposed to be a very compelling, interesting character. She's a lot of titles are really thrown about her. She's the darkest angel in the Wasteland, or the fifth rider of the apocalypse, which those are some pretty heavy metal like titles to have. So I thought the movie was really interesting.
Well, this is the heaviest heavy metal movie there could be. In fact, one guy is on one of these giant killing machines playing the guitar.
He's probably one of my favorite characters from Fury Road.
Okay, right. Yeah, well, he gets it, doesn't he?
Yeah.
In the beginning of the movie, one of these monster things with a car body that's incorporated, they used a 59 Oldsmobile. Mm-hmm. And in real life, BJ, my family had a 59 Oldsmobile. We had a great big green four-door thing, and it's a 1-year model. It's just that one, you either had it or you didn't. And seeing that in the movie was wild for me, because you don't hardly ever see one. You don't see one on the road. Since my childhood, I've maybe seen a half a dozen of them. You don't see one in a car show. I mean, it's really an obscure vehicle. So the fact that, oh, look, oh, there's even a green one. Yeah, this is my childhood car. Yeah. There's the four-door, see the green on the far left?
Yeah.
Right? Now, my family, in 1962, we lived in Venezuela. And my mother had that car, my redheaded mother, driving across the countryside between Puerto La Cruz and Caracas.
Yeah.
Right? I said that with the best Spanish accent I could muster. And just imagine, look at that thing. And there it was in the Mad Max movie. So for me, it was like, oh my God. Look at those taillights. Look at that trunk lid. Look at that grill. Look at that. Yeah. Just imagine how fun it must have been to make all these wild vehicles. I mean, this is way beyond. I mean, this is his custom car. This is like they had the Munster Mobile, right? The Dragula car and stuff like that. These are the same mentality. This is just way over the top. Everything way over the top. The thing on the left looks like it's got a speaker cabinet.
Yeah.
Right? Looks like Hartke cabinets, right? Those black cabinets with the aluminum cones, like a big giant. It's a stereo. See on top, there's a great big speakers, great big horns. Down below are the bass drivers, right? So, and that's the guy. Isn't that the guy playing the guitar in the red? Yeah.
That's the guy.
So that's his rig, right? He's rocking out while they're doing this. I really enjoyed this movie for that reason.
Yeah, this is what the current like Mad Max films do really well, is expanding on sort of the base ideas that first like came in the first ones. Because in the original ones, it was just like these hot rod cars with the exposed engine heads.
Right, he had a car with a blower.
And the dirt bikes. Yeah, it was very basic. And then George Miller, who's directed all of them, continually builds off of that, and now he's got this really great vision of very creative, like apocalyptic looking items in this world. One of my favorite things that I actually saw was one of the guns that Furiosa first uses in the movie, which is a real gun. And it was really cool to have used that because it was the revolver whose handle was brass knuckles, and it didn't have a barrel, I believe, but it had a knife as well that came out from under the cylinder. Uh-huh. So it was a knife, a gun, and brass knuckles all in like one. And that's a real item that actually exists in real life. That is a real.
You
gun.
Have one of those?
I don't have one, but I've heard about it. I've heard about how impractical it is, and in our modern.
Who did that review? In your average street fight, this thing really doesn't work right. We went downtown and we picked on a number of people, and this thing really didn't cut it. One of the guys killed me. Another guy, I'm giving it a 3 on a scale of 10.
Yeah.
Ay.
But it makes perfect sense in this world. In this world, it makes perfect sense.
Everything is top weapon.
Everything is welded together or jerry-rigged together, or like things are like tight, like held together by duct tape and bolts and screws. And because that's the way that the apocalypse really is. And that I'm really glad that was still a very cemented feature in this movie.
It was kind of like Cuba in its own way, What one of the vehicles had a big rotating screw on the back, and then hanging from it were chains with spiked balls. And when the thing went around, the spiked balls swung and spun around like this, you know? And one of them had a giant crane arm. And somebody back there is plucking people off of motorcycles with a giant crane arm, you know? Absolutely wild. And they must look at that thing, right? The harpoon gun. Yeah. Now, that they must have, I mean, with me, I'm such a caveman. I don't know CGI from reality.
Yeah.
I think they really had this. Do you think that somebody made that prop?
That was probably a real practical prop, yeah.
Yep. So the idea that they made, you know, all these, I mean, giant tires and just every crazy thing. I don't know how much of it was real, how much of it was CGI, how much, you know. That
was one thing I actually wanted to draw attention to, was that there were a couple moments in the film where perhaps maybe to you, like you said, you're not, you know, when you CGI, it kind of blends together. But for me, who's kind of grown up with that, I'm able to see the difference between good CGI and bad CGI. There was actually a couple moments in the film where the CGI is kind of noticeable and it looks very fake. There was one, probably the worst moment in the entire film is when it's like just a wide shot of the desert and there's like a human skull out there, and then a lizard kind of crawls out from the eye socket.
Right.
But it looks like it was really bad CGI. It was really bad. And there are certain moments where
you mean there wasn't a real skull in a lizard and they didn't just happen to catch the lizard coming out of the eye hole? I'm shattered. What can you have faith in anymore?
You see, but that's the point, though, is that the movie magic is, yes, you know it's not real, but it looks so believable. You know, the technology is so advanced that it's supposed to make you feel as if it is real. And when the CGI and the technology look as poor as that, it really breaks that immersion and you don't feel as connected in the movie. There are many moments where, especially with the monster truck, that I noticed was like there are parts where it's sort of climbing up the mountain or driving through crowds, and you can certainly tell that it's, you know, it's very fake. It doesn't look great.
Yeah, it was impossible.
There was that one scene where they, like, the war between Dementus, my bad. When the first altercation between Dementus and Immortan Joe happens, and they have all those those hooks, those crane hooks sort of swinging. That's another moment where you can tell that if you look closely, like, the CGI doesn't look very great there. In contrast to Mad Max Fury Road, where there's a lot of practical effects, and when there is CGI and it feels more sparsely used there, it looks a lot better. And in this one, I felt like there was a much more reliance on CGI instead of, like, you know, the magic of using, you know, those real practical cars, or at least more, or scenes where the CGI is used and isn't as noticeable. You know, like, that magic is sort of missing in this one a little bit.
Yeah, that's why. For me, Avatar was like the point in my life where, like, because that was entirely CGI.
Yeah.
You know, and the credits afterward were thousands and thousands of people. So for me, that was the real, like, okay, from here on in, you gotta expect everything to be a cartoon.
Yeah.
You know, everything. Like, you know, and it's the fact that it's interesting. We have artificial intelligence. Now we have movies that they're a blend of human beings. And another one that's like that, it was really interesting for me, was there was a thing about the Spartans, the 300 people that fought at Thermopylae against the Persians, right? I think it was called 300.
Yeah, 300, yeah.
And it had real people in it, but very little real people. Like, even the clothes they were wearing weren't real. Like, everything, like, the whole movie was a cartoon. The people they were fighting against were cartoons, but there were some actors. It's a really interesting blend of humanity and technology, kind of like the Borg, you know? Do you know about the Borg?
Yeah, I know the Borg.
Okay, kind of, you know, and it's interesting to me, like, I have a photographic memory now. Why? Because I got a phone, and license plate, got it. When is the store open? Got it. Where did we park the car? Got it, right? Photographic memory. This is my cyborg thing, is my phone, right? That's, like, I can remember where we were and where the car was at the airport and that kind of thing. And little by little, they're integrating this into people. And in this movie, the girl, Furiosa, she has to chew her arm off to get away from the trap.
Yeah.
And then she creates a bionic arm. And here's somebody that grew up in the desert as a devastated child, but knew how to create a completely mechanical, biomechanical You know, like when she thought the hand moved, you know, she creates this whole thing and does it quite handily, like in her spare time, you know, with knitting needles and, you know.
One of the really cool things about the arm was that she pulled like a cord and like a tiny motor, and I thought
she pull started a gas motor, a little baby bee from like from a radio controlled airplane, right? Those baby bees. I don't know if you grew up with that, but to like power up the bionic arm. That was hilarious. And there it is. There's right there. You see coming out of her shoulder.
Yeah.
That's the air cooled cylinder.
Yeah.
Right? And then you can't really see the pull start thing, but it's hanging down there. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was hilarious when she first came out and the trouble started, you know, like getting the arm powered up, you know? Mm-hmm. Fantastic. I was a professional mechanic for many years, a car repairman.
Yeah.
And this stuff is all for me. I love it. You know, I love mechanical things and belts and hoses and lines and tubes and, you know, fulcrums and levers and pulleys. And this movie was so full of all that.
Did you find like it was really like as a, because you were a motorcycle mechanic for like a while. And did you find that it was really like there's a lot of detail being put into all these engines and, you know, all the machinations?
Yeah, as ridiculous as it was, there was nothing there that didn't seem possible to make. It was like, we can make that. A friend who had one like that, you know.
Yeah.
But and then in this picture, here's something I want to bring up. You see the teddy bear hanging from his belt, and I didn't realize all through the movie it was just one more weird thing in the movie. When they captured a girl when she's a little girl, he gave her the teddy bear.
Yeah.
Then when she reached a certain level of maturity where she rebelled against him, took back the teddy bear, right? And then he kept it to the end. Now, this movie is fun for mechanics, and, you know, it's fun if you like, you know, just over-the-top violence, you know, people being torn in half and all that kind of stuff. But then the movie changed, and it became woke. And when the two of them had the final showdown, where he had to go against Furiosa.
Yeah.
And she said, "You stole my childhood, and you stole my upbringing, and you stole my innocence and all this." He turned around and said, "Well, the same thing happened to me." He goes, "I was captured, and I was brought up in this environment and everything." And the teddy bear, now I suddenly realize, not now, but when I watched the movie, I realized this is the last remnant of his childhood self.
Yeah.
This is his last remnant of the sweet young person he could have been and grown up, and, you know, and instead he turned into this weird monster, right? So he tells her this. So I'm like, dude, you're responsible for your own actions. I mean, you might have been beat up as a kid or something, but you didn't need to turn into this.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm tired of people not taking responsibility for their current condition. You know, if you're a drunk or a junkie or something now or whatever, and, well, you know, you were brought up in a house with an alcoholic and, you know, alcoholic mother or alcoholic father or something, and now you're one. No, you don't get to cop that plea. That's a 2-bit cop-out. And the fact that they justified his violence that way, to me, that was such a cheap Hollywood cop-out. Like, I did not want it. I wanted them to die fighting. You know, I wanted them to be, okay, you're the gladiator now. You kill the other gladiator. You know, you're, you know, just the way he's got his arms up. This is not victory for him.
Yeah.
This is, he kind of looks like Moses, a little bit like Charlton Heston and Moses, doesn't he? I mean, you know, it's the same scene there without the weird axe thing. Look at that. So he's got the teddy bear, right? And there he is on the chariot. He's got 3 Harleys pulling the chariot, you know. But that was a weird thing at the end for him to be, he says, and now you are me. You've become influent. You can never go back. You can't go back to your utopian. She's trying to go home at the end of this, right? Mm-hmm. But you can never go back because you're changed now. You're mutated. You'll go back there. You'll never fit in. Those are nice people. You're no longer a nice person. You know, I didn't like that. Mm. I didn't like it. And I didn't like it that she didn't go home. And I didn't like it that it didn't resolve that way. It was a bad. At the end, she was a sadistic lunatic too.
Well, her story doesn't conclude here because, like I said, this is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So her story continues and concludes in there.
In the movie that we saw that was in the past.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This is more of a backstory on Furiosa. And so let's talk about that, actually. Let's talk about it like as a backstory and as like how it helps, like how it stands on its own, as well as like how it adds to the rest of the franchise. For one, this is a backstory on a side character, so it's not really a Mad Max movie because Mad Max himself is not in it.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
When I came out of the theater, what could have called it anything. Could have Crazy Dave, and had the same movie.
I did like that they were sticking with a lot of the same concepts. You have those sort of road warlords, so you have this new one, Dementus. Because that's one of the things that's a staple of Mad Max.
I wonder how many seconds it taught him to think of that name.
You had Lord, Humongous. He was one of my favorites. But this one you have Lord, you have Dementus, and then you have Immortan Joe. And so I'm glad that they were sticking with that. But I felt like Dementus, who was really central to Furiosa's whole character story, because it's all about basically how he basically brought her up to be this way, the Dark Angel of the Apocalypse. And I didn't feel like they did a lot with this character at all. I felt like the story felt kind of rushed in that aspect where they were trying to, give backstory on Furiosa and on the events before Fury Road, but like sort of rushing the, understanding who Dementus was, as well as, just kind of.
You reviewed another movie like this where you needed like more humanity. That's interesting. I think this is one of your things.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to keep an eye on you.
Well, I think, the apocalypse is very much like kind of a human case study. It's about when society falls apart, who really comes out of us,
Right.
Mad Max is a lot about this guy who lost his family, but he continues to show compassion on the road. And he continues to be, how do you continue to be a hero in the apocalypse? And in this one, it's more interesting because Furiosa is not really a hero. She's more of an anti-hero. And so it's like, how do you come up with this character who's at this level of brutality, but still continues to be heroic in this way as well? And
it was pretty good that way, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I rooted for her. I liked her. I was,
Yeah, and then you also have these villains as well, but they also try to flush them out as humans because Dementus had his own things as well. Because I believe Dementus says earlier that he had his own family as well, and that he lost them. It's kind of funny. It's like he kind of mirrors Mad Max himself, where he had a family of his own, except where Mad Max
They're all like that out in the desert, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all have dead families and tortured pasts. I'm going to have to watch the other one because this guy here, Immortan Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, his mask, it looks very much like a Geiger creation. You know who Hans Ruda Geiger is?
Yeah.
The brain salad surgery guy and everything. Yeah, it's kind of Alien, the movie Alien.
Yeah.
Right, it's that same kind of art. I don't really know who he is. He was just a character in the movie that was sort of unexplained to me, but people who know this would probably know that.
Yeah.
And all of these things, like the People Eater, this John Howard guy with the fake nose, that reminded me of Cat Ballou, where the guy had the fake nose, right? Mm-hmm. And then this thing where they're out in the desert and somebody keeps his humanity. There is a movie called Electra Glide in Blue, and Robert Blake was a police officer in the 60s, and he had like a wacky sidekick that was kind of a troublemaker. And in the original Mad Max movie, Mel Gibson, he has a wacky sidekick who's a troublemaker, Goose.
Yeah.
Right? And so those were very parallel that way. Like that Electra Glide in Blue movie is almost the beginning of this. Like it's not an apocalypse, it's just in Southern California, but it's out in the desert, And he keeps his humanity, even though all kind of horrible things happen. He's got to deal with bureaucrats and everything. It's kind of interesting, these stories.
Yeah.
The guy with the fake nose and everything, and Praetorian Jack. He was my favorite hero character, Praetorian Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the truck driver. He was the guy driving the fuel truck. and he had to survive all this stuff. So he was a master of weapons. He gave her the weapon that you liked, right? The movie was great in lots of respects. I think it had a wimpy ending.
Yeah, I felt like the movie was a bit rushed a little bit, and I felt like it was. I felt like the movie.
But you wanted 3 hours of that instead of 2 hours of that.
It's not that I wanted like longer. I just wanted it to be, I think, fleshed out better in certain areas. Sort of like that dynamic between Furiosa and Dementus. It just felt a little weak there as well, and I felt like there was I like the relationship that they built between Praetorian Jack and Furiosa, because you really see where it's like. For her, it would have been really easy to lose any part of semblance of humanity that she had from, that she grew up with, except she continued to maintain it through her friendship and her bond with Jack. And so that was a good.
He was kind of a Dutch uncle. Yeah.
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 He was kind of like a romantic interest. He was also kind of like her mentor. And so that it was cool to sort of, have that aspect of her character explored there as well. And, but that part was also done very quickly. The whole movie was like it seemed like a very quick and like trying to fit a lot of things in.
They sure did pack a lot in, didn't they? Mm-hmm. They sure did. And the action scenes were very, very plentiful, but that's easy now.
Yeah.
That's common in movies. But yeah, these relationships with all these people and all the circumstances that they had to deal with. And I mean, there were armies of people that were just maniacs.
Yeah.
Just totally, just riding across the desert and going crashing off the road. And how long could a society like that last? You know what I mean? Like in a year of people acting like that, they'd pretty much be all dead, right?
Yeah.
So did you felt like it stood alone? It could stand?
I think the fact that they were trying to rely a little heavily on sort of like the at the end, they sort of like it kind of did that thing that Dune did again, where they were like setting up for the next movie or the movie after. It was sort of like, because it was a prequel, they just didn't want it to have it stand alone on its own. They wanted to put in a lot of things like together and sort of rush it to sort of connect to, the next movie, better without it really giving it a lot of strength to stand on its own. It very much felt like another just franchise edition.
I think when they do that, it compels you to watch the other movies. Yeah. So they get another view. There's more money.
I was watching the movie the whole time. It was like, this is really cool, but this kind of just makes me want to go watch Fury Road. It's like, why would you want to go watch a prequel to a movie where the prequel is supposed to expand? It's not supposed to make you feel as if it's just like a reduction of the movie that it's, coming before. And that's kind of what like Furiosa felt like to me. It felt very rushed and packed and very franchisey and very like, just trying to.
I had some of that. I had some of that feeling with the middle Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
The first 2 or 3 were phenomenal, and then there was 1 or 2 that were like not much substance.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, well, if you like watching Captain Kirk talk to Dr. McCoy or Mr. Spock, we have an hour and a half of that for you, and there wasn't really much story. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I'm just impressed with the amazing visual experience that the whole thing was.
Yeah.
And audio as well.
Yeah.
You ready to rate?
Yeah, I'm ready to rate it.
I personally, because I enjoyed it as much as I did, but it was really nothing special in that realm. I'm going to just go with a 7. Mm-hmm.
Once again, the visual experience and the audio experience, as well as seeing an expansion of the Mad Max world is really cool. I love seeing all the new, whatever engines that George Miller comes up with this time, whatever weapons or outfits that are presented this time, as well as I always look forward to seeing who the next Mad Max villain, because they're going to be much more crazier than the last. I didn't feel like that with Dementus, and I also agree with you. It didn't feel like that there was a lot of substance for this movie to really stand on its own, and it was very much just promoting go see the other movies. And so for that, I'm gonna have to give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, we're pretty close in agreement. In fact, so much so that we almost wore the same shirt, right? Yeah. I've said it so many times before. This was supposed to be a young man and an old man at odds, and it turned out to be a young man and an old man that pretty much agree. And that's for me, it's pretty wonderful to know that that there are young people that I identify with that have the same sort of values and opinions and stuff. You don't want to feel that there's no connection with the world. Like, I'll just die and you'll end up like this.
Thank you for watching The Real Generation Gap. Make sure to join us next time. And leave a comment down below which Mad Max movie is your favorite. We'd really like to know. So make sure to come watch us again, and thank you.